people like the St. George magazine in Germany, for instance, the social media team in Aachen are doing amazing things on Instagram, Facebook. Rafa is head of security. G'day guys, so we're in Aachen this morning, 9:30, for the Global Dressage Forum. It's being held here in Aachen today, and the topic or the program is innovation in dressage. So let's see what it's going to be all about. Looking forward to some interesting speakers and seeing what the future of our sport holds, together with technology and the way everything is changing. So we've just come from a day in Aachen at the Global Dressage Forum, the stakeholders meeting. There was, of course, a lot of interesting things talked about, the regular issues and improvements that a lot of the working groups are working on to improve judging, a code of points. All these things are coming together slowly to make the sport better for everyone, judges, trainers, riders and spectators, of course. But the most interesting part about the whole meeting was, for me, we came across a point, a very exciting, most relevant point, and that is marketing. We had an expert there, Will Pitt, from Imagine marketing company. Will was really looking at or giving us information on how fans are viewing sports, and how that has changed very rapidly in the past 5 years or so, with the internet and social media and everything that we're being consumed by, where our attention is now. It's modern. If you look at every other sport, you know, there's action cameras, there's GoPros, there's drones. You know, it's about now modernizing the sport and thinking about bringing people ringside. And I've said this before, ringside. People have to feel that they have to feel the sweat, they have to feel the breath of the horse, they have to be there in the moment, bring the people really to the action and present our sport in all the beauty. So what was really exciting was we had Richard Davison, who was presenting, as usual, does an amazing job. He started off by saying that we were slightly on the back foot in the dressage world when it comes to these kind of things, and I think that possibly is one of the greatest understatements of all time, in that I think we're in many areas miles behind. I think where we fall down is we don't have a major platform in where people can go and see dressage, find out about dressage. Why don't we have a main platform, for instance, like they do in football, like they do for Formula One, like they do for horse racing in Australia? I mean, being able to tell the stories of the horses in lead-ups to these big championships. You know, that we have content, we have live productions that give information on the past history of dressage sport. Who, you know, Aachen's been going for 100 years. You know, who were the first winners of the Grand Prix? How has it progressed through time? You know, all these really interesting things about our sport that are not being told, and I think it's a total waste that we don't have that in place, and I think that can be a really huge thing to really put dressage on a platform. I think we also need to think about the way we create the content, modernizing it, thinking about action cameras, thinking about drones, all these things that people are used to seeing sport now from 4K cameras, from these new modern perspectives. Filming dressage from a scaffolding 20 meters away is already disengaging the audience from what we're used to seeing these days. If you watch, mountain biking, surfing, snowboarding, you're snowboarding, you're seeing the spray of the snow off the snowboard. He's jumping through the air and doing an aerial maneuver, and the camera is following him all the way. We need to be able to start to make steps to put an action camera in the judge's box. Maybe you see the first center line of every horse. You maybe even hear the first comment from the judge and the points from the judge. Maybe that's pushing it a little bit in the beginning. Might strike a few nerves with judges and maybe riders on that, but really to give people an insight of how the sport is, and really give them an insight and a feeling to how amazing it is. It also came up in the meeting that there was a rider that's horse was lame in the ring and got belled out. If you're sitting there as a spectator and you have no background and no history and no story behind that, you just see a horse come in, he goes lame, automatically our human response is that you think negatively about it, because the moment was negative. The horse got lame, and so your brain starts to think, oh, the poor horse, why was he riding it in there when it was not lame anyway, and how terrible it is, and it's horse cruelty and all the rest of it. But if we had told the story of all those riders on a platform before, that you could sit down and watch dressage sports, and you could see how riders had prepared, what lengths that rider had been through, and the character of the horse, and how he loved to perform, and how he was in his work every day, and he has his own little stable in this place, and he feeds his horse beer on the weekend, and the horse has such an amazing character. As soon as that horse had a problem in the ring and got belled out, your mindset is immediately that you feel compassion for the rider, for the horse, all the work that they've put in, and on that moment it happened to be like any other athlete. You're in a huge stadium and you have a lot of pressure, and you're in the moment, and you're maybe pushing yourself to the point that you don't when you're relaxed and you're in training at home. And quite often in any Olympic sport, athletes have injuries in the moment of performance. It also gives the riders the opportunity afterwards, if the people don't have the background and you have to come out and try to explain what went on, if you have the feeling that everybody already knows really what's going on in the sport and what riders and horses go through to get to that point of riding International Grand Prix, and then at the end you can feel totally free and honest to explain what went on in the moment, that he was really going for it at that moment, and a problem that he's having in the body came out at that moment. That's maybe something that's not coming out in the training at home. So I think they're really important points to be able to enable our sport to move forward. The other thing, it also came up in the meeting, but I hear it a lot, is that people say that we are disadvantaged because we have an animal, because people see it as an animal, and some people see it as a pet, some people see a horse as something of beauty that should run wild in nature with the butterflies. But I think that's also just a totally negative way to look at it. I think that we have a huge advantage over all other sports. All other sports also have disadvantages and criticism and difficulties through the sport. You think of all the sports that have doping sagas and problems like this, where a rider, for instance, has built up a huge reputation, won a lot of big championships, and then they find out that he's been doping or taking performance enhancing drugs, and then the whole sport is frowned upon, and then all of a sudden all the athletes must be taking drugs and it's not a clean sport and blah blah blah. So all other sports will have their problems, but I think if we look at the horses as being a disadvantage, it will only be a disadvantage. It will only go in the way of negativity, and we only need positive things in horses. That's why we work with horses. That's why we have animals. The racing industry, the Spring Carnival in Australia is probably one of the greatest economic earnings for Australia. Okay, we have the gambling that goes with that, but we have, through that period of the Spring Carnival, they're producing content showing past championships. You know, every tradesman in Australia is sitting there waiting. You know, the Melbourne Cup is called the race that stops a nation for a reason. People that have nothing to do with horses, have never even brushed or handled or barely looked at a horse, are becoming excited, and they're all going in the betting sweep and having a barbecue and drinking beer, and they're all there following and backing a horse that, you know, that was from a guy that was training in the backyard somewhere, and he's the underdog, and everybody gets behind the underdog. You know, these stories, when you put it together with an animal, people become compassionate about the animals, and it becomes interesting, that combination between human and animal. And I think that is an instinct for us that's a huge advantage, in that people can see these beautiful stories and the work that goes into the performance of competing at a high level, not only as an athlete yourself, but together with an animal, that an animal has such a purpose and such a feeling of greatness and power and expression, together with humans in sport, I think is what it's all about. It's what the Olympics is about. It's what all sports lovers become excited and addicted to. So I think we should continue to tell the stories about the horses, be totally open and honest, start to be smart, take action, do more in creating platforms in which people can see actually how it is and be able to tell the stories, and start firstly to ask the question of what is our goal. Why can't dressage be the largest economic growth of any sport in Europe? Why couldn't it be? We have so much content, so many stories, so much history, so much emotion, so much passion. I mean, there's so much to tell about our sport that's not being told, that if we start by saying what is our goal, why can't we be the largest economic revenue earning sport in Europe, if we start to tell the stories? So what is our goal? A little bit of improvement, make it a bit better, make it a bit more popular, or make it the greatest thing that people could ever experience, which is the thing that we feel as riders and trainers and judges and fans already. And then what are the steps to take? Why can't the big organizations, the FEI, you know, the trainers clubs, individual nations, federations, start to create platforms that tell stories about their own countries, about their own riders, about our sport, and try to make the sport as best and as exciting and accessible as it possibly can be?